I'm very glad to have FX give us another talk. He is a PhD student at the University of Bern in Switzerland, and he is working in the crypto and data security group with Christian Kashin. Let's give it up to FX.
Thank you very much, Avi, for the introduction. So today I'm going to speak about Track Me If You Can, an ephemeral coin tracing scheme. Joint work with Nacho, Christian, Rohit, Luisa, and Michel. And so the agenda for today is, well, some pieces of background because I guess we are not, everybody's not up to speed with privacy and regulation in the cryptocurrency sphere. Then I'll introduce the formal model and the scheme. To give the intuition, I'll also speak about a strawman protocol that we derived at the very beginning. Then I'll speak about the solution, the construction that we came up with, and some applications. You'll see I don't have benchmarks. It's a work in progress. I don't have a slide for benchmarks. We are working on it, and I will just say a few words on this at the end. So for the background, well, privacy in digital payments. On one side, we have privacy. On the other side, we have regulation, the regulatory compliance. So for privacy, we know how to do it. We have examples in the wild with Zcash, with Monero. Also, it's been decades that we are actually working on privacy in payments. With eCash, for example, there's a whole body of literature on this. And well, here we could have this privacy in, for example, CBDCs, the central bank digital currencies, which are being investigated in several countries, well, including the EU, for example. And also we could have privacy in stablecoins. Would be great. We could have privacy, low fees, and some programmability, right? Well, regulators are kind of afraid of this because if they give us privacy, well, how are they going to fight money laundering, terrorism, financing, and also tax compliance? So, well, there is this fundamental tension between strong privacy and regulatory compliance. And if we study at the solutions that are proposed today, for example, if we look at the digital euro, we are unfortunately going to see that there is little to no privacy in those schemes. And the probable reason is that, well, regulators will probably not accept black box payment systems. They will not accept payment system with Zcash privacy because they will have no control. Well, they will not be able to just make sure that it's not used for money laundering. And in this talk, I'm actually motivating our work in saying that, well, we are going to bend a little bit privacy to convince the regulators to actually implement privacy. How are we going to convince them? Well, we're just going to give them some tools to trace criminals. Of course, it has been done in the past. The prime example of balancing regulation and privacy is the so-called privacy budget, not to confuse with the privacy budget in the differential privacy space. But here, the privacy budget, you can transact below a certain threshold privately, and after this threshold has been exceeded, you must disclose some transaction details, if not all of the transaction details, to an authority. Now, sometimes the regulator and police might say, oh, we want to trace a specific user. So we also have, let's say, a more powerful tool for the regulators. It's called a coin tracing scheme. And in this scheme, you have the authority marking specific users or coins, and the transaction that this user will do afterwards will be able to be traced by the authority. It kind of enables a targeted investigation. problem with that is that, well, if you trace a user, and due to the kind of the exponential structure of the transaction graph, at some point, well, you'll have everybody being traced in the transaction graph because you need this tracing information to propagate in the transaction graph. What I also want to say is that in previous solutions, the tag size would grow linearly in the number of transaction inputs. There's some problem in terms of privacy, but there's also some problems with that in terms of efficiency, right? Now, our goal is to design a tracing scheme that degrades over transactions. What does it mean is that, well, I'm given h hops to transact, and then after these h hops, I will be untraceable again. Let me introduce the model and the scheme. And by the way, if you have any question, just ask directly because I don't have the chat next to the slides here. Let me introduce a little bit the setting because the setting is not exactly the same as the one of Zcash, for example. It's not permissionless. Here it's permissioned. See it as a permission flavor of Zcash, where we have confidentiality, we don't see the amounts, we have unlinkability, we cannot link multiple addresses together, and we have untraceability, meaning we cannot, we don't know the origin of the funds. So we cannot backtrack in the transaction graph. Actually, the graph is quite obfuscated in this setting. We also have each user being enrolled and identified by the authority. That's the main change in terms of the permissionless setting. Why do we need that? Well, we kind of need that to have some meaningful regulatory, because otherwise it would be very easy to spawn a new identity and to escape any regulatory mechanism in place. Now, in our setting specifically, we have the authority emitting tags periodically to every users. And so in this tag, you have some information, some tracing information. And think of this tag being totally agnostic to the data model. It's some metadata that is sitting next to a coin, sitting next to an account. And so it's totally imaginable to put this scheme on top of any type of privacy-preserving cryptocurrencies. Now, the authority can also choose to embed tracing information in the tag or not. So as a user, if I'm receiving a tag, I don't know if I'm traced or not. Everybody is receiving a tag, but as a user, you don't know if you're traced or not. And the tracing propagates in the transaction graph as usual. And untraced users, they simply fly under the radar of the authority due to the, well, underlying privacy properties of the ledger. Now, let's introduce three types of actors. We have users. Users, they are potentially malicious. They want to escape degradation. They might do some. Did someone ask a question? I heard some sound. Okay. Feel free to ask if there is a question. So users might act maliciously. They might try to escape degradation or might it might sound odd this way, but they also might try to degrade their tracing tags faster, which is usually the most sensible thing to do as a user, as a criminal, right? Validators, they simply verify the non-interactive zero-knowledge proofs. At every transaction, they verify some signatures of the authority. And the authority, it may attempt to just exceed its mandate, trace user for more than the hop budget allows. Now, let me introduce the algorithm. So there is the first algorithm that is tag. It produces a tracing tag. And for this, to produce a tracing tag, you need a secret key. you need to provide the ID of the user that you want to trace. This ID can be freely chosen. And as you will see, it's kind of important that we can freely choose this ID. And it's perfectly imaginable to have a mapping between real IDs at enrollment time, and some IDs that are freely chosen by the authority to comply with some algebraic structure of the scheme. B is a flag that is set to 0 if you're untraced, or set to 1 if you want the tag to embed some tracing information. And age is the kind of the hop budget, the time that the number of transactions until which you won't be traced anymore. Merge is a simple algorithm. It takes multiple tags and it spits out a new tag that just embeds the union of traced identifiers. On the right, for example, you can see that Alice with W1 and Bob with W3 are merging their tags, and the new tag W prime just encodes the union of identifiers Alice and Bob. And we can see that W2 is a dummy tag. It doesn't contribute anything to W prime, but also it shouldn't tamper with the union of identifiers. Now we have the most interesting primitive, which is degrade. It takes a tag W and a set of candidate tags, and it gives you W prime, a degraded tag, and some proof that it has been degraded correctly. Why do we need to prove that it has been degraded correctly? Also because we want to we want this new tag to be unlinkable to the previous tag. Why do we want this? Well, we also don't want to break the privacy properties of the underlying ledger. And just so you know, as a user, whether you're traced or not, you don't know it. So you should run this degradation step at every transaction. And now for the validators, they can verify the signature if it's the first time that the tag is emitted by the authority, or approve if it has been degraded. Now, at some point, the authority might say, okay, I want to know what's happening with this transaction. I'm going to take the tag and just open kind of the information that is enclosed in this tag, and it will gives you the set of traced identifiers. Of course, if you're untraced, you won't appear there, or if you have exhausted your hop budget, you won't appear there either. And now just a little recap. So you have the authority setting up the public parameters. I omitted this algorithm. So it gives the users and the validators the public parameters. At some point, it gives the users a tracing tag, and the users can degrade their tags without the interaction with the authority, nor the validators. But of course, the validators will need to verify that this checks out, right? Users also can merge tags together and send it to the ledger. At some point, the authority retrieves W prime from the ledger and attempts to retrieve the set of trace identifiers. Now we have some security properties. Some are at odds with each other. So let me go over them. We have trace correctness, pretty straightforward, but within H hops, tracing must succeed, right? Of course, merge correctness is also equally as important. If you merge some tags, they must reveal the union of traced identifiers. And verification correctness for the validators, well, honestly produced tags and proofs must verify. Indistinguishability is an important feature because as a user, you should not be able to know whether you're traced or not. Ephemeral traceability is kind of the meat of this work, because after H hops, tracing should fail, even for the authority with the tracing key, right? Unforgeability is kind of standard. Only the authority should be able to produce a valid tag. And unlinkability is to keep the untraceability and unlinkability of the underlying ledger. So we should not be able to link a degraded tag to its previous representation.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Before the tag is degraded, let's
Yep.
say for those H hops, can I link all of those to the same user?
No. Well, yes. Well, in its ciphertext form, you shouldn't be able to link them. But if you decrypt as the authority, you will be able to know that they are that they spit out the same identifiers, of course, because you're still within the hop budget. But for the maintainers of the ledger, they shouldn't be able to know that these tags are actually related in some fashion.
Right. Thank you.
Can I ask another question?
Sure thing.
So if you are being traced, can you find two friends that are not being traced and send your money to one of them, and then they just send their money back and forth between each other each times, and then the money is now clean and they can do whatever they want with the money?
Yes, I will elaborate on that in the last sections, in the last section of this work. But very good question. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Let me introduce the kind of the Strawman protocol, just so you know it's broken. So we have exponential L gamma of a prime order group G. You have an identifier that is M here. You encrypt it, and to have unlinkability, you just re-randomize it. And of course, the merge properties is enforced through homomorphism of this encryption scheme. And how do we have ephemerality? Well, we thought that we could just add some noise to the plaintext. And yeah, let me go to this slide and then come back. So as a user, you have an identifier that is kind of a space, and within that space, you can add some noise. And if you do some form of nearest neighbor decryption, you will always come back to this identifier. And of course, if you exceed the noise, you will end up in another space, a neighboring space, and the authority will not be able to know that it was you in this space before. Just for the sum, of course, when we merge, we end up with the sum of identifiers. How do we recover the different identifiers? Well, just think of them as encoding them in binary, and we just assign powers of 2 to users, and then for example, if you have user 1 and 2, they sum up to 3, and the authority will be able to know that with 3, users 1 and 2 are the ones being traced. That's why it's important to be able to choose the identifiers. If you want a multiset, easy peasy, you just take a prime that is higher than 2. Now, why does this solution doesn't work? Well, the problem is that if you end up in a neighboring space, high chances are that the authority will be able to know that you just end up in a very close space as you were before. And also, if you're not traced, you will also degrade your value, and you will end up in a space that is potentially the one of a trace user, and you will be falsely accused. So that doesn't work very, very well, right? What we want is actually that users that are not traced remain untraced, of course, and that if you have exhausted your budget, you will end up with the same value as if you were not traced from the start. How do we do this? Well, we just slightly change the setting. We use a group G of prime power order q to the power q to the power h. And so if you apply q h times, well, turns out that you will get 0 because of the structure of the group. So we call this map nilpotent. And after t hops, t being smaller than h, it's still good because, well, you won't be 0 and you will end up in the different digits. More on that just in 2 slides. And the authority will just know that your identifier has just moved and it will retrieve your identifier. But if you're over h, then you will stay at 0 and the authority will have no way of knowing that you were at some point in there. And also we use homomorphic scheme as before that we can re-randomize. So we re-randomize and we just exponentiate the ciphertext with Q. The setup hasn't changed that much. We also choose some prime encoding R, but this time we need also another prime Q that is here for security, and we need Q to be greater than R to the power n so that the two encodings don't conflict with each other. Now, when we encrypt, we take the identifier times the Boolean flag. It's 0 for a dummy flag. So if you're not traced, you will get 0, but you will have no way of knowing if it's 0 or not due to the semantic security of the encryption scheme. When you degrade, you just raise it to the power q, but you also put some randomness in there to have unlinkability. To trace, well, the authority decrypt the tag. If it's 0, then it returns the spot value. That means that nobody is there. Otherwise, it writes v in base q. And for each non-zero digits dt, it decomposes it in base r. R is our prime encoding that allows to encode multiple users in a sum. And just think of it being 2. So that means that we can only support a set in that setting. And we can recover the identifier at depth t. Now, let me give you an example. For the sake of this example, I'm taking parameters that are not secure. I'm taking a parameter, a group of order 5 to the power 3, which is equal to 125. And it's just easy for us to reflect about the scheme. Just know it's insecure. We have an encoding base, R is equal to 2. It's also easy for us computer scientists with this kind of base. And just think you have 2 users. So just think that fx as identifier 1, and just think that aviv as identifier 2. Now, if we do a transaction together, we will merge our tag, and the corresponding value will be 3. We will raise it to the power 3, and it will give you a 15. So the ciphertext is raised to the power 3, but actually we are the plaintext is times 3, right? And then it gives you 15. At some point, it gives you 75. But after the hop budget has been exhausted, it gives you 0 in this group of order 5 to the power 3, 125. Now, it's kind of different than what we are accustomed to. The group order is q to the power h. It's not a prime, it's composite. So El-Gamal encryption and re-randomizations still work the usual way, of course, because it's algebra in the end. Now, let's think of security. The projection g to the power q to the power h minus 1, it maps directly to the prime order subgroup of order Q, which means that we have an easy way to just map it to this group to which we know the order. So, of course, we need DDH to hold in G of order Q to the power H, but it's strictly stronger than having DDH in the order Q subgroup. And if the projection does not break DDH in G, that doesn't mean we have a reduction in the other way. That should work, of course, because DDH holds in this group of prime order. But that means that to make it secure, we must have something that is the security parameter grows in H. So it's linear in H, the security parameter. And it's, for example, here, it should be at least 2 to the power 2 times lambda with lambda bit security. And well, that shouldn't cause any problem besides the size of the ciphertext, but it also creates a small problem with the off-the-shelf library that we can find on GitHub or in the wild there that are made with these standard parameters. So we actually had to implement from scratch with these new parameters. So it's also something to consider. It takes more time and it's way less efficient since the parameter size is bigger. I just wanted to mention that here we did some tests. Of course it's big, but it's still to generate the proof, for example, it's still in the millisecond ballpark. So it's totally it's slower, way slower, but it's still efficient for this kind of usage. Let me speak about the applications, and I will also answer the question I had in the second place. So here we have a prospective tracing. So that means that a coin is marked for tracing. Until it's marked for tracing, we don't know anything about it. I guess I would say that's a strength because, well, this scheme really allows users to have privacy. And if we suspect a user, the authority just mark it for tracing, and then it will be traced after. But when I talked about this scheme to some practitioners, that they told me, well, sometimes we just want to know the origin of the funds, and we cannot know that in advance. So in that case, you need some retrospective tracing. And for that, of course, you need to put a trapdoor in each of the coins. And well, to mitigate this problem, of course, you can secret share the trapdoor. But I guess I'm more of a fan of prospective tracing because it's better for privacy. Now, ECT, so ephemeral coin tracing, should be part of a regulatory toolkit. I guess that the regulator will not only pick ECT, it will pick other tools. It will be able to freeze accounts. It will be to ask mandatory disclosure to some clients acting maliciously. And retroactive trapdoors could also be one thing to consider, for example, for special accounts such as exchanges or legal entities. But we could perfectly imagine that physical entities, persons, would not get a trapdoor on their account. And the nice thing with our scheme is that we have a hub budget that could be a policy parameter, that could be a parameter for a warrant, for example. So I'm answering the question as, well, if you act maliciously within the hub budget, it will probably raise some suspicion for the authority. And if the authority sees you transacting very fast and doing some very small transactions within the hop budget, maybe in the next epoch, because we assume that it's emitting tags periodically, maybe it will ask you for a bigger hop budget, or maybe it will just tell you now you need to disclose the transaction details at every step of the transaction. So we also have applications such as protective tracing. If you're under, let's say that you're a high risk individual, maybe you want to ask the authority to put some tag on your account in case you were abducted and criminals would take a hold of your account, they would be able to trace the funds. There could be a time-bounded investigation, as I told before. It could also be integrated into the privacy budgets. Say, for example, within upon exceeding a threshold, we get assigned a tag, and within age hubs, maybe age is decided upon policy. We are traced, and also exchange could be assigned a tag to just show that the origin of their funds is legitimate, for example. Now, okay, let me conclude this presentation. We had a problem existing coin tracing schemes. They granted unbounded surveillance. And we have ECT, a primitive with cryptographically enforced hop budget. And the first construction, the Stroman protocol, was kind of broken, and the second construction with the nilpotent map seems to work. And we can see multiple applications, and I think this type of scheme should be part of a greater toolkit for the regulators. I thank you for your attention, and feel free to ask any questions.